You know, we've been talking about how the politicians take money from special interests and the lobbyists, and they serve them and they don't serve us. Well, we're going to talk to a guest now that's going to really back that up with numbers. Sheila Krummels is the executive director of the Center for Responsive Politics, and they have gathered up the information on exactly how much money our representatives are taking. Sheila, welcome to the Young Turks.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. First, let me ask you, where did you get all this information?
Well, most of our data is based on campaign contributions and expenditures, and that we download from the Federal Election Commission. But we track a lot of other political finance, too. The lobbying data comes from the House and the Senate disclosure offices, and the personal financial disclosures come from there and from the U.S. Office of Government Ethics. And these 527 outside interest groups, that data comes from the IRS. So we gather it from several government sources.
All right. And in the fourth quarter of last year and overall the whole of last year, how much money did the 433 congresspeople that you could track, how much money did they wind up raising?
Well, they gathered $78 million in just the last 3 months of 2009, and a total of $294 million for the entire year. And they had even more than that, $300 million cash on hand. So there was some left in the kitty from previous cycles. So $300 million overall to start the year in the election year this time.
Now, the other 100 or so that you couldn't get, is that just because some of them are not running or some of them have not posted the information?
A lot of them have not. A lot of that is not yet filed for whatever reason. It's not been posted in the electronically available data. It should have been there. It was due at the Federal Election Commission as of January 31st. But we just gather whatever is made available electronically by the FEC. So there might be some reports that are held back for corrections or auditing. There might be extensions or late reports.
I got you.
There are a whole variety of issues.
I got you. So Sheila, is there any way of knowing of that $300 million that these politicians have sitting in their bank? How much of that came from regular Americans and how much of it came from lobbyists, corporate interests, special interests?
Well, that's what we do on our website, opensecrets.org. We track and slice and dice the data so that you can say how much is coming from Wall Street, how much is coming from lawyers, how much is coming from lobbyists, how much is coming from any sector or category of industry in the United States. And we also look at it in terms of how much is coming from individuals or PACs, how much is coming from wage earners or non-wage earners. You'd be amazed how much money is going to candidates from homemakers and retired people. And of course, the question there is that really money that they're directing, or are they just proxy donors for their wage-earning spouse? But the main focus of our work is trying to summarize for people, to make it intelligible at a glance, really who is bankrolling elections in the United States.
Mm-hmm. And do you have, is there a number for lobbyist money, or is that too broad a category?
No, that is one of our categories. And let me just pull up for you on our site, Open Secrets, on the 2010 election overview, you can see the donors' top overall totals by individuals and then totals by industry. And once again, like most cycles, lawyers and law firms are number one, and this is a strongly Democratic source of campaign cash. Of course, some of that money is coming from class action trial attorneys. But the number two, and that's in 2010. In previous years, it's lawyers and law firms have usually been at the top and always skewed Democratic. But in previous cycles, where the Republicans have held the majority, this list is heavily skewed toward Republican favoring industries and some quite heavily. Second on the list is retired. Again, who knew that pensioners were such a massive source of wealth and political activism? But $45 million from lawyers, $37 million from retired. Securities and investment law, Wall Street comes in third so far this cycle with $25.7 million.
When you say 25.7 million from Wall Street, is that in the last quarter or is that the whole year?
That's so far this cycle. So for essentially through 2009, because we haven't started gathering the data for 2010. But here you can research all the money coming from lobbyists, which so far this cycle is 11.3 million, ranking them at number 8 as a top industry. How much is coming from Hollywood, TV, movies, music? How much is coming from pharmaceutical industries or oil and gas or electric utilities? And I think the main point here is that this is money that is coming from an elite slice of American society. I mean, the people who are giving the contributions that we can see of more than $200 from individuals, and PAC contributions are up to $10,000 per recipient. This is representing kind of the corporate titans of America, and again, often their non-wage earning spouse coming on the same day and the same amount to the same person, and often giving the maximum. So this is, and it represents, as I say, a very small set of Americans who can afford to give this kind of size of contribution, and if they can afford it, would choose to do so for a political candidate.
We're talking to Sheila Krumholz. She's the executive director of Center for Responsive Politics. Sheila, I want to go back to that question because there's a lot of numbers thrown out there, and I know that sometimes it's hard to generalize, but of the $300 million that are sitting in the politicians' bank accounts, is there any way of knowing how much of that, because if a lot of that came from you and I, meaning, you know, I'm really motivated to support my local congressman or senator or whatever it is, I don't mind that obviously nearly as much as I mind if it's a pharmaceutical company that wants to get a certain law passed so that they, you know, make billions of dollars more. So how much of that is from, you know, actual voters, and how much of it is from these other organizations?
Mm-hmm. You know, we, of course, have to state up front, we can never know what motivates any single contribution. It might be policy in Iraq. It might be abortion policy. It might be any number of things. It might be that they live next door or they go to the same church as the candidate. Who knows? But the point is, when we look at it by economic interest behind these individuals and PACs, again, which is really the only thing we can measure. The courts deemed it important enough to require people to provide their occupation employer because they knew about the concern of corrupting influences of people trying to perform an end run around the limits on corporate contributions and bundling, which is what happens. So what we can see in these individual and PAC contributions is that these are individuals who list president, CEO, executive, vice president, partner. These are the corporate elite by and large, and unions, of course, make up some of the top donors. The union PACs do, not union rank and file, but overall, at least 70% of the money, and in this current cycle, 77% of the money comes from corporations and employees, individuals affiliated with corporations. 77%
of the money. Okay. Well, then I guess we're going to get 23% representation for us. Okay, so let's talk about senators real quick. How much is the average senator getting per year? And then who are some of the senators with the most amount of money, and how much do they have?
Mm-hmm. Well, so far, on average, senators raised $381,000 in the last quarter of 2009, and all told $1.6 million for the entire year. So there are much higher figures being raised by members in the Senate. In fact, if you'll bear with me, I just want to get the exact figures, but essentially the average winning House race in 2008 cost $1.4 million, and the average winning Senate race cost $8.5 million. So really,
$8.5 million for a Senate race.
Right. So, and the least expensive, the least expensive winning campaign cost $1.9 million, and that was John Barrasso of Wyoming, replacing, I believe, Senator Craig. So, you know, as you can see, this kind of a price tag is well beyond the reach of the vast majority of Americans. And, you know, I think a lot of people are okay with that. They think, well, people who are going to run for public office, they're not your average American. But the point is that the odds are so stacked against you. You can have great name recognition, you can have great campaign skills, charisma, hard work ethic, great campaign organization. If you don't have money, you don't stand a chance.
I was talking to someone who was thinking of running for office, and their local, in his case, was Democrat. A local Democratic Party said, "Look, you're going to need at least $350,000 to even have this conversation, right?" And if the average House race is, what did you say, $1.4 million?
Right.
The average winning House race spends $1.4 million. Yeah, I mean, how can anyone in America really run? I mean, unless you either are fabulously rich or you know people who are incredibly rich and are willing to give you that money, or you go to the people with money and you say, "I'll do whatever you want."
Well, I think that's clearly the concern, that people are delivering too much in return for the financial bankrolling, the financial patronage, and that once in office, they then need to immediately turn to start raising money for the next election. And the next election is, you're constantly dialing for dollars. You need these people. It's a mutually beneficial system, and you can never say never. You can never say no to your financial patrons, or you risk the consequences. And, there are exceptions. There are people who get into office. Marcia Fudge of Ohio won. Her House campaign was just $94,000. But when that happens, there's almost always some kind of extenuating circumstance. People often win with low dollars if the incumbent they're replacing went to jail, or if there was some kind of scandal, or if someone it's just incredibly rare.
So Sheila, it seems to me that the bottom line on this is, of course, the politicians don't pay any attention to their voters, because the money buys the voters through ads and more people you can sign up for your staff, and in 100 different ways. It buys the votes. So the people who really decide the elections are not the voters, or the people who gave you the money. So, of course, why the hell would they give a damn about us? If they're smart and they want to win re-election, they're going to be much better off, statistically speaking, catering to the people who gave them all this money.
Well, I agree with you on the one hand. On the other hand, of course, we have to be cognizant of the fact that it's not a lost cause, that we shouldn't give up on democracy, that there is recourse for us as regular citizens, that we pull the lever on Election Day. Money doesn't elect people to office, we do. And so we need to just arm ourselves with information to understand the money's role, how we're being subjected to, sometimes irresponsible advertising, and we need to educate ourselves and make informed decisions. And so that's what we're trying to do at OpenSecrets.org. We're just trying to put the information out there, make it easily accessible so that people can understand the influences that are changing legislation, that are affecting legislation, and affecting them as they make up their minds about who's qualified to represent them.
And the one, positive I got out of this was that, look, at least there is this transparency, and we at least do see where the money's coming from. And so that gives us a little bit better sense of what's happening. If we didn't see that, then the situation would be far more dire. And I don't want anybody to get me wrong. Like I said in the last segment, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But Sheila, last question to you. It seems that light has to be through campaign finance reform. Otherwise, everything else is meaningless, because money's going to overpower the voters on almost every single issue. So the campaign finance reform becomes then almost more important than every other issue combined.
Well, certainly, I have to state, we don't take a position on public financing or on specific platforms for campaign finance reform. But certainly campaign finance, although it's not perhaps the driving issue that people, wake up to in the morning and think about as they're falling asleep at night, it is the overarching issue that influences every other issue you care about. And it overall has an enormous impact on our democracy. So we do have to pay attention to how money is changing things, not always for the better, usually for the worse, and pay attention to what needs to be changed. We at CRP, at Center for Responsive Politics, are focused on making sure that we can see the money, that it is effective, that disclosure is happening, and transparency is supported to the best degree possible.
All right. Sheila Krumholz, Executive Director of Center for Responsive Politics. The website is opensecrets.org. Thank you so much for joining us on the Young Turks.
Thank you.